Welcome back to News for Today, the show where we cut through the noise and give you the deep context behind the headlines. I'm your host, James, and today we are diving deep into a policy discussion that is dominating the political landscape: the potential for a massive overhaul of immigration enforcement. With me, as always, is our resident expert analyst, Elena. Elena, great to have you back.
James, it's great to be here, though the topic we're covering today is certainly heavy and, frankly, unprecedented in its scope.
It absolutely is. We are talking about statements made by former President Donald Trump to CBS News, where he confirmed plans for what he explicitly called the largest deportation operation in American history if he secures a second term. Elena, let's start at the top. The sheer scale of this promise. What does largest in history actually entail, logistically speaking?
That's the critical question, James, because we are moving from political rhetoric to logistical reality. When analysts discuss the undocumented population, we're talking about roughly 11 million people residing in the U.S. Even a fraction of a mass deportation program would eclipse anything we've seen, including the 50s operations, or even the heightened deportations under the Obama administration. The core challenge here is locating, apprehending, detaining, and transporting millions of individuals.
And this isn't just about manpower, is it? Trump mentioned using the National Guard and potentially parts of the military to assist in these operations. That brings up immediate legal and constitutional tripwires.
Exactly. That is perhaps the most legally fraught part of the proposal. Typically, the Posse Comitatus Act restricts the use of the U.S. military for domestic law enforcement purposes, while the National Guard operates under state control unless federalized. Utilizing the full force of the U.S. military, even in a supportive role for ICE or Border Patrol, to round up civilians within the country, regardless of their legal status, is a massive legal and normative step. It fundamentally blurs the line between defense and domestic policing.
Right. Let's talk about the terminology he used for detention facilities. The term detention center or holding facility is familiar, but the former president introduced a new phrase: ununification centers.
Ah, yes. The language shift is crucial here. Unification centers is a very deliberate softening of language, clearly intended to imply humane, perhaps family-focused, temporary housing. But when you are dealing with an operation of this magnitude, rounding up hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people, these are effectively massive, government-run detention facilities. The idea of unification likely stems from trying to preempt criticism about family separation, but the reality is that rapidly processing and detaining that number of people requires massive, newly constructed or repurposed federal land facilities.
So essentially, a massive expansion of the existing detention infrastructure, repackaged under a less punitive-sounding name. That makes sense from a political messaging standpoint. But let's step back and look at the nuts and bolts of the financing. Operations like this don't just happen. What is the estimated fiscal burden?
The estimates are staggering. Studies analyzing similar proposals put the cost not in the billions, but in the tens or even hundreds of billions over the course of a single term. You have the personnel costs, hiring tens of thousands of new ICE agents, state and federal coordination, building these new centers, transportation logistics, court backlogs, and due process costs. It's an enormous economic commitment, effectively diverting massive federal resources away from other domestic priorities.
That's a good point about due process. Even if someone is undocumented, they have rights under the U.S. Constitution, especially concerning their detention and the process leading to their removal. Does this scale of operation risk collapsing the judicial review system entirely?
It absolutely does. The existing immigration courts are already notoriously backlogged. If you flood that system with millions of new cases, the idea of timely, fair adjudication becomes virtually impossible. Due process demands that individuals have the chance to present claims for asylum, relief from deportation, or review of their status. A rapid mass roundup approach inherently prioritizes speed over constitutional safeguards, which leads to significant legal challenges and ethical concerns about mistaken removals or the removal of individuals who qualify to stay.
Let's pivot now to the broader implications, the Why It Matters section. Beyond the legal and logistical nightmares, what is the societal and economic impact of ripping potentially millions of people out of the U.S. economy and communities?
The impact would be immediate and severe, James. Economically, these 11 million people aren't just statistical figures. They are workers. They are especially prevalent in sectors like agriculture, construction, hospitality, and specialized services. Mass removal means immediate labor shortages, spiking wages in the short term, and major supply chain disruptions. Farms might struggle to harvest crops, and construction projects could grind to a halt. Economists generally agree that this type of sudden mass disruption is detrimental to overall GDP growth.
And societally, the chilling effect this would have on mixed-status families and communities.
The chilling effect is profound. Imagine communities where neighbors and colleagues suddenly fear leaving their homes, driving, or interacting with government services, even if they are citizens. It fosters an environment of intense fear and distrust. We saw this concern raised even during smaller-scale enforcement surges. A program of this scale turns federal enforcement into a highly visible, community-wide operation, severely straining relations between law enforcement and immigrant communities, regardless of legal status.
Moving into our quick Q&A section, Elena, these are fictional listener questions based on the public's reactions. First, a listener asks, given posse comitatus, how can Trump legally use the military? Isn't that a definite non-starter?
It's not an absolute non-starter, but it's exceptionally difficult. The military can provide logistical support, transportation, temporary housing, but generally cannot engage in arrest or seizure activities against civilians. However, there are exceptions, notably the Insurrection Act. While presidents rarely invoke it, if a president declares a state of insurrection or deems the crisis severe enough, they can deploy the military domestically for law enforcement purposes. That would be an extreme, rarely tested constitutional maneuver, but it remains a possible path to facilitate such a large-scale operation.
Fascinating. And our second question, if the cost is in the hundreds of billions, as you mentioned, wouldn't Congress have to explicitly fund this? Could funding hurdles stop the program before it even starts?
Absolutely. This is the ultimate check on executive power. While the president has significant discretion in how appropriated funds are spent, an operation of this scale would require massive increases in budget authorizations for agencies like ICE and DHS. If Congress, particularly if it's controlled by the opposition, refuses to allocate the necessary funds for new facilities, thousands of new agents, and logistical assets, the program simply cannot achieve the promised scale. It would become a budget battle immediately upon inauguration.
Elena, this has been an incredibly insightful breakdown of a policy proposal that has massive implications for the country, economically, legally, and socially.
It's crucial we discuss the details, James. The rhetoric is big, but the operational reality requires deep scrutiny.
Indeed. We've covered the logistical quagmire of mass deportations, the legal questions surrounding military involvement, and the massive financial and social costs. The key takeaway here is that an operation of this scale is not just a simple policy tweak. It requires restructuring major parts of the federal government and challenging long-standing legal norms. Elena, thank you again for your expert analysis.
My pleasure, James.
And thank you for tuning in to News for Today. Join us next time as we continue to unpack the stories that shape our world. Good night.